In this video, our SAP Analytics Cloud product experts will demonstrate the main features of our new release. Feel free to jump straight to the features you're interested in by using the timestamps in the description below. Let's dive in and hear from our SAP Analytics Cloud product experts.
Hello, I'm Adrian Westmoreland, a product manager with SAP Analytics Cloud, and I'd like to introduce you to a new feature to allow the activation and deactivation of users from the SCIM API. Administrators can now automate via the API the ability to activate or deactivate users, so preventing deactivated users from consuming a license or logging onto SAP Analytics Cloud. This allows administrators more control of their user populations and simplifies management of SAP Analytics Cloud via the API. This closes the gap with the existing capability, which was available only through the user interface.
Hello, my name is Thomas Feri and I'm a product manager at SAP. Today I'm going to introduce you to the Performance One-Pager in SAP Analytics Cloud. The Performance One-Pager is an extension of the system overview and shows potential daily performance-related problems. These problems can be long-running BI queries, high story loading times, or long log-on durations for specific users, but also long-running data actions or import jobs. We point out very large planning versions that are currently being worked on, and additionally there's an overview of faulty BI queries, import jobs and data actions. We have already provided content on these topics over the last few years, but we want to go one step further and consolidate relevant information for administrators to streamline their work. I will now demonstrate the new Performance One-Pager and the additional information provided for your reference in a brief demonstration. You can reach the system overview via the top entry in the system menu. There are several help information that guide you through each section's content. Each area has a popover with detailed information on the KPIs shown. The popover can be filtered and shows details of individual entries such as changelog, for example. The analysis can be continued via integration with the existing analysis tools. What you see here now is the integration with the backend performance statistics, where you can check the history and runtime distribution for detected long runners easily. This workflow runs through all the KPI tiles. By clicking on the KPI, the popover opens, allowing the user to jump into the performance analysis tool here for a detailed analysis of the high story loading time. Filters such as user and date are passed via URL parameters, and the tool opens with the relevant filters applied. The Performance Analysis tool allows me to identify long-running widgets and gain a comprehensive understanding of the loading sequence for the entire open story action. This enables me to pinpoint the bottleneck and subsequently enhance the loading of the story. The next workflow demonstrates how to check for and resolve errors on the system that users may face. By reviewing the history of specific errors, we can gather information about the context in which the error occurred. This means the model and the story. From here we can open again further tooling. In this case, the user request could not be processed by the backend system due to resource constraints within the same. This information helps us now to plan the next steps to keep the system stable and prevent the users from running into this issue again.
Hello, this is about the latest feature that we have released as part of analytics cataloging. When there's a lot of content in the catalog, it can become difficult to find the content that you need. And hence, we have introduced this concept of grouping all the content into meaningful quick filters be utilized by the end user for easy discovery. Now let's see this in action. We are in the catalog and you can see all the quick filters up top. I can easily click any one of these and it will narrow down my search results. And this concept can be used for grouping, for example, your business functions, or let's say there's an important project and you want to categorize all the content for easy discovery. And you can also further filter this content down to further narrow down the result. Now let's see how we set this up in the catalog in the backend. You can easily create a quick filter, like existing filters, to make up this grouping of content. And this can be anything that we created, right? These quick filters can also be utilized by catalog editors to quickly do metadata enrichment of the content. So for example, let's say we selected this filter, and then it will add a bunch of filters to the card, thus making my life as a catalog editor easier.
Hello, my name is Bettina de Nonville. I'm Product Manager for Data Analyzer and will present you the new innovations as part of the QSE Q4 release. On the Data Analyzer table, you got the option to show or hide the totals of multiple dimensions on the same axis at once. You can add in-cell charts to the table measures. You find the context menu option by right mouse click on the measure header. Within the styling panel, we give the user the option to choose the report template and to wrap the text of the table. And finally, we do support 3 more chart types: the combination column and line chart, the combination stacked column and line chart, and the stacked area chart. Now I'm going to jump to the live demo. You see, this query has 2 dimensions on the axis where the totals are visible. You can select both and hide the totals with one click. The same global setting is available in the Builder panel under the 3-dot menu. And let's say I individually turn the totals on again for product. The global setting is in a mixed state and nothing is selected. The global setting has priority and overrides the individual setting of a dimension. Next, I add an in-cell chart to the measure revenue. Here you find a context menu like in Story. You can easily turn it on, and the data is visualized as a bar chart if the measures are on the column axis, and automatically shown as column chart if the measure structure is on the rows axis. This is a planning model with actual budget and forecast data. With the report template, the table is visualized according to the IBCS standard. The wrapped text gives the option to split long text into multiple lines. And finally, I show you the 3 more chart types. You will find them here in the list of available chart types. Let's start with the combination column and line chart. The combination stacked column and line chart. For that, I add an additional measure to the line axis. And finally, the stacked area chart. That's it from my side. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hi, my name is Scott Godfrey, and I'm one of the product managers with SAP Analytics Cloud. And today I'm going to walk you through some of the new features we have coming as part of our Q4 2024 QRC release in the planning area. So the first of these is an enhancement to version management within the modeler. So now within a version dimension, directly in the modeler, you have the ability to add new versions, new blank versions, or delete existing versions. Now, if you want to delete an existing version, you'll have to ensure that that version is blank. So you'll either have to purge the records or you'll have to know in advance that the version doesn't have any records. So of course, this improves and simplifies the version management process. You no longer have to go to the story to manage versions. So with that, let's jump over and see this in action. So I'm in my version dimension. You'll now see that this edit button allows me to add new versions. If I click that, I can type in the version description, create the ID for me. I can define the category. And if I had any other required attributes, I could populate those. Likewise, if I have a version that I know is blank, I can select the delete the selected member, and it will be removed from the dimension once I click the Save Model button. So this is the version management in the modeler with our Q4 release. So the next enhancement I want to talk about is some improved mapping capabilities we've introduced with our cross-model copy as part of our Q4 release. So this is sort of an extension of what we did in Q3, where we introduced this attribute mapping for the copy. Now we've introduced more flexible mapping options in that copy. And specifically what this allows you to do is now map any dimension type to any other dimension type exclusive of measures. So for example, if I want to map a generic dimension to an account dimension, I can do that. If I want to map a date dimension to another generic dimension, I could do that. I additionally get the ability to map based on identical names or identical names including ancestors, regardless of the dimension type. And I can use attributes on date dimensions to make the mapping of those dimensions more flexible. And so this really gives you more options when you're using cross-model copy to address some of the scenarios that perhaps previously you would have had to use an advanced formula for. So let's jump over and see this in action. So just to lay the foundation, I'm looking at my source model that I'm going to use in this cross-model copy. I have a sales account, which is actually a generic dimension, right? So this is not an account dimension. If I look at it, you'll see I have two members and I have an attribute called target account, right? I'm going to use that for my mapping operation. If I look at my date dimension, I've actually changed the date dimension here to be user managed, and I've added an attribute called target month. So what I'm doing is mapping each month to the third month or the last month of the quarter. If I jump over to my target model, you'll see that I do have a proper account dimension, and I also have a date dimension which has not been modified, right? So this is a system managed date dimension. Now just looking at the data action that I've created, if we look at the account dimension here, if I unmap this, you'll see that I can map my sales generic dimension to my account dimension. If I go into that, I can now choose the source property. If I choose my target account, you'll see that it goes ahead and maps the two elements that I have in my source. So that's fine. I can pull up my date dimension. You'll see that I'm mapping based on IDs, or identical names rather, and that I've chosen the target month attribute that I created in the source model to create that mapping, and it generates 3 mapping rules. And the reason for this is because I have a filter in the data action itself to only map Q1 of 2025. So if I jump over to my story, I have on the left my source model with my generic sales account and my attribute on my date dimension for the target month, which is going to be March. So I'm expecting all the data to be written to March of 2025 for my gross sales account. I'll run the data action. And yes, my data is summarized into March. So again, this is the flexible mapping in our cross-model copy operation as part of our Q4 release.
Hello, it's Derek Johnson. I'm a product manager for SAP Analytics Cloud. In this enhancement, we're going to be looking at how we can dynamically extend the planning area when we execute a data action. So in this case, the ideal scenario is you would have your start edit defined, and then we're going to extend this in the data action. If you do not have a start edit defined, it'll define that based on the recommended strategy that's set in the configuration of your data action. So let's take a look at how this works. Although we could have executed the same scenario using the SAP Analytics Cloud add-in for Microsoft Excel, we're going to be demonstrating it within the story. Here you can see we have the start edit defined for our version to include just Germany. We're going to extend this via the data action where we're going to multiply our French region by a set factor and recalculate the results. And here we're going to be able to look at our version management, and we can see that we've now extended the planning area scope in this case to also include France. Hello, my name is Derek Johnson. I'm a product manager for SAP Analytics Cloud, focusing on planning topics. And in this enhancement, we're going to be looking at unit of measure conversions. Similar to currency conversions, we can use a unit of measure conversion as a data action to calculate various calculated units and persist them in the model. So now we're going to take a look at our scenario. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the model. Then we're going to take a look at how we define the data action to do the unit of measure conversion, which is similar to currency conversion. And then we're going to execute that data action in a story. So here you can see we have quantity that we've loaded for our sales quantity, which is based on the unit of measure stored as part of the customer dimension. And we also have another quantity which is going to be stored at a fixed value for 4 kilograms. And that's what we're going to be using the data action to do that conversion. So we convert our sales quantity and mix unit to kilograms. So here we're looking at our data action we're going to be using for our scenario. And notice that the conversion step icon has changed. Simply selecting that, we can start to create our conversion rule that we've created here. So here you can see that we're taking our sales quantity and we're going to use that as our source, and then we're going to convert that to our sales quantity that's stored in kilograms. So it's very easy to set up this conversion as a data action and then execute it to store that fixed unit. So let's go take a look at this in the story. Here we have a story that has our data action as well as a simple table and scenario where we have our sales unit being displayed in pounds and kilograms based on the geography. So we're going to use our data action to convert these different sales units into kilograms. So when we see the data action executes, everything converts to kilograms. So this is an easy way to use data actions to do these unit of measure conversions and schedule that as a data action. Thanks.
Next enhancement we have is the ability to now enter data where you have an account or a measure whose aggregation or exception aggregation is defined as none. So there are some scenarios where maybe you don't want values to aggregate, but you still do want to be able to distribute a sort of a common value down to the leaves. You'll be able to do this now. So in scenarios where the member is defined with none aggregation, the leaves will receive, if they are unbooked, they'll receive the value that you enter. All leaves will receive the common value. If only selective leaves are booked, then only those leave members will receive the value that you enter. And in any case where the descendants have mixed values, right, what you'll see in the element with the none aggregation, you'll see a star that will still allow you to enter data in there. And again, it will distribute according to the rules I just described. So let's jump over and see this in action. So if we just check our model, you'll see I have a price measure with exception aggregation none. I also have a quantity measure with exception aggregation none. Now note this also will work on accounts, assuming the account is the primary structure. But in our case, we'll show the measure. I'll jump over to my story. You'll see that in the quantity, I have no value currently. Now if I key a value at the cruise bike level, 1,000 units, each bike category or bike type within that will get the 1,000 units. If I change any of the individual children, you'll see that what happens is I get a star as the parent to indicate that it is a none aggregation and that the descendants have different values. If I look at the price only is only distributed to 3 bikes currently. Now if I wanted to establish a common price, I could type in 649. It would be distributed to the bikes that have prices already established. And then again, if I was to change one of the leaves, then I'll get a star at the none aggregation level. So again, this is our ability to enter data when either the exception aggregation or the aggregation type is set to none. Next enhancement I'd like to talk about is an improvement we've made to the calendar wizard, and that is the ability to directly select users or teams in the people step. So now when you're in the calendar wizard and you're navigating through and creating the process hierarchy, selecting the relevant nodes, and you come to the step about assignments, you can directly select users or teams from within the user experience for the relevant roles. Previously, this assignment was only available by referencing specific properties containing the users or teams. And so obviously this streamlines the creation process. So let's jump over and see this in action. So I'm in my calendar wizard. I'm not going to walk through the whole process. I've sort of jumped ahead here. And you'll see that when I get to step 4 of my people assignment, I can now select within the user experience directly, I can select the users or the teams. So for example, if the assignees, I want to assign the team plan assignees, I can do that. If I get to the viewers and I want to assign, let's say, plan reporter, I can go ahead and do that. And then if I was to step through the process to completion, I'll see a preview. Obviously the preview will show that I have my teams assigned. And then if I go ahead and were to generate the tasks, then obviously I'm going to see that those teams are assigned to the respective roles in the individual tasks. Just show the details here, and you'll see that the team assignment has taken. So again, this is the direct user and team assignments in the calendar wizard as part of our Q4 2024 QRC release. So with this release, we're introducing the concept of the calendar template. So the calendar template is a file repo object that represents a structure or substructure of a process that you want to model. So what are the features of that in the initial release? So you can take an existing process hierarchy, you'll be able to save that to a template that will include all the sub-processes and subtasks. You can create a new process based directly on a template. You'll be able to utilize a template in the event wizard or the calendar wizard to instantiate a process for multiple elements within the driving dimension. So maybe you have the template is just a structure of a given branch, but you want to deploy that over several branches. You'll be able to use the calendar wizard to do that. And then additionally, because it's a file repo object, you have the ability to use the ACN to transport the template across tenants. So this should make the deployment of new process instances more straightforward, should improve flexibility for you to model more complex scenarios and deploy those across multiple branches. And of course, it'll be easier for you to do this in different tenants. So let's jump over and see this in action. So let's say I'm in my calendar. I have an existing process that I want to use to create a template. I select the process itself. Under the options, I can save it as a template, and then it'll ask me where in the file repo I want to put that object. Now just note, this is how you would generate the template currently. We do have plans for a template builder in the future. So I'm just going to save this as quarterly forecast, just to illustrate that I can save that. Of course, then that object is available to me in the file repo. Now, how can I use that? Well, I'll use another template that I have, but let's start first with creating a process directly from a template. So I'm going to select my cost center plan, and this is sort of a development plan. I can put a prefix and a suffix on there. Change the dates, remove that parent. Change the date. And then click generate. And you'll see what it does is take the template to generate an entire process hierarchy. So this is one way to utilize the template, right? If I want to deploy an entire process. The other way I can do it is using the calendar wizard. So if I pull up the wizard, what we're going to do in this instance is we're going to use a template that only has a simple structure, and we're going to deploy that simple structure across our driving dimension. So we'll just speed things up as we select our model and our driving dimension. Then when we get to the Events tab, we have this option From Template. So if we choose the From Template, we'll point to a template that we have now. And this template will have a submission step or a general task and then 2 review tasks. Okay, you'll see a general task and 2 review tasks. And I want to deploy this structure across the process hierarchy. So every child has a general task and 2 review tasks, right? I'm not going to go ahead with the assignment. Let's just skip ahead. So we'll speed this up slightly and just jump through the preview. We'll generate our tasks and we'll see that the calendar template has been applied to the individual nodes within the driving dimension. So this is the calendar template as part of our Q4 2024 QRC release.
Hi, my name is Jeanne Bigonet, and I am one of the product managers with SAP Analytics Cloud. Today, I would like to introduce the Excel add-in QRC 4 deliveries. First, a new option to activate or deactivate the pause refresh feature and provide clear visual feedback on the pause refresh status, active or inactive, is provided. Let's jump over and see it in action. A new bottom right corner option is introduced where you can activate or unactivate the pause refresh option. When you have activated this pause refresh, you can change the layout of the report, adding new member, changing hierarchies, adding new dimension on your reports without any change apply on it. The idea, of course, here is to gain in terms of performance when you would like to design first your report and then retrieve it display as designed. It is also now possible to rename the SAP Analytics Cloud tables as desired. Let's jump over and see it in action. A new option is introduced on the designer panel named Rename Table. As soon as you select it, you can, of course, enter the name of the table as you desired. Then, as you can see, the table gets the new names. So this is visible already on the designer panel, but also visible on the list of tables names in Excel. Now the planning model option, Optimize Planning Area, is retrieved and used in Excel. The option is accessible from the designer panel. Last, 2 new custom functions are introduced to allow a variety of the filter of an existing table and enable the definition of asymmetric axes. This gives users the flexibility to create asymmetric reports in row, columns, or in a combination of rows and columns. Let's jump over and see it in action. This is a report created with filters, with specific filters by dimension for category, colors, and time. We want to create an asymmetric display for this one. And we have now this new formula named SAP Asymmetric Filter, where you can define, as you can see, by dimension in my case, or by category and time, so for actual and for budget plan a different period of time. I can define for each location in this case and different colors some specific time and period category. As soon as I have defined it, I can go to my designer panel and you can see the status of the report has to be updated. And when I click on it, I have this message saying that the asymmetric filter has been applied. On the bottom, you retrieve this asymmetric filter created. Another formula named SAP block has been also introduced, and with this formula, you can make your filtering creation more flexible. Because first, you create your blocks with the help of this formula. And when we have defined the blocks, of course, you have to link the 2 blocks with a standard SAP asymmetric filter. As you can see on my screen now, after entering all the parameters, you have this asymmetric filter formula which is applied and creating this asymmetric report.
Hello, my name is Laura Vega. Today I'm going to present you the new features we are going to deliver in Q4 in the SAP Analytics Cloud add-in for Microsoft PowerPoint. The first feature we are delivering this quarter is the support of Microsoft PowerPoint desktop version. Until now, we were only supporting the web version of PowerPoint, and with Q4, we are now able to work with the add-in in the desktop version of PowerPoint. The only restriction you will have within this desktop version of PowerPoint is the fact that you will be able to use only connections that are designed in SAP Analytics Cloud as acquisition connections or live channel connections. The second feature delivered this quarter is the ability to add widget directly from the Edit pop-up window. This means you will insert the widget in the exact state as you can see it in the pop-up, meaning with the same size, including elements such as the legend and all the data points, which was not really the case when sometimes you were adding the widget from the pane with a smaller size. So let's see how this works in a demo. I have here a presentation that I have built for Best Run Bikes Company with a set of slides that contain some SAP Analytics Cloud widgets that I have inserted using my SAP Analytics Cloud add-in for PowerPoint. And so I'm going to add in this slide a new visualization coming from this story. Let's take this trend. So if you look at the widget here in the pane, you can see it's quite small and the data is not really visible as it is in SAP Analytics Cloud. So now if you edit this chart in the pop-up window here, you will see it much larger and you will see all the data that is contained in the chart. And now it's very easy to navigate through this data. And for instance, if I'm interested in this last year, I can select 2020 and filter on it. And now I can directly add this state of the widget in my slide using the add widget here in this pop-up. And now I will get in my slide the exact visualization as I have built in the pop-up window. The last feature delivered this quarter is Overwrite Widgets or Refresh Widget. This option allows you to get the latest version of the widget in the story of SAP Analytics Cloud. When you refresh the widget, it will replace it by the latest version in the story, including the widget data and properties, the widget type, and its structure. So now let's take the same widget we have previously inserted and see how works the new refresh option with the refresh widget option. So if I click on refresh here and select this widget, I can do two things. As you can see, you can select refresh data or refresh widget. If I use refresh data, my widget will be refreshed, keeping the same filters, so here on 2020, and only the data will be refreshed, keeping the same structure and filters as I had in the slide. But if I select the same widget and use the refresh widget option, then you will see that the chart is refreshed, and now you can see the chart as exactly as it is in SAP Analytics Cloud, and the filters I applied here have been removed.
Hi, welcome to SAC Q4 QRC What's New video. Let's look at the first innovation that we have delivered, lazy load non-visible charts, participating in chart scaling and access alignment. One of the problems with active viewport rendering is the queries for charts which are participating in chart scaling and axis alignment were fired irrespective of them being visible. This impacts performance even further with the unification of stories with app design because users are using tab strips and are able to change the visibility of charts. To overcome this challenge, we have doubled down on active viewport rendering, and now even if the charts are participating in chart scaling or axis alignment, only the visible charts will be rendered. To demonstrate, here I have a story where the chart scaling has been set on measure attrition. Please note the length of the bar for attrition. Now as I scroll down and bring more charts into the visible area or make more charts visible, I have other charts which are set on attrition, and here you can see the length of specialist which has value 500, and now when I scroll up, the length of the attrition bar has been the length of the attrition chart has been re-rendered, and it has been adjusted to reflect the scale across the story or across the page. The next innovation that we have delivered is bulk migration of classic stories to the optimized experience. The bulk migration is aimed at easing the migration efforts of our customers and increasing the adoption of optimized stack. Bulk migration will allow users to select multiple classic stories from a folder, check if they can be migrated completely, or if there are any feature limitations. In case of feature limitations, users can always go back, make changes to the base stories, and for migrations, users can decide whether they want to overwrite existing classic story or create a separate version of the optimized story. Further, they also have an option to choose whether they want to save the converted story in the same folder or in some other destination of their choice. And post conversion, we give a summary of the migration status. So now let's look at the demo for this. So here I have my stories module, and you can see that there is a tab available for story conversion. Here you can navigate to the desired folder where you have your classic stories. You can select the stories that you want to migrate. So here I have 5 different classic stories which I want to migrate, which have various functionalities. Now I can click on convert to optimized story. At this point, it will check whether these stories can be migrated successfully or not, and if they have any issues or warnings. So, for example, story 1 and 2 can be readily migrated. For story 3, 4, and 5, there are some feature limitations. So, to know more about the feature limitation, you can just click and see. So here it says that Smart Insight is something that is not supported. And here users can always have an option to open the story in the new tab, make edit, and rerun the process. So let's go with the next step here. So as I'm moving ahead with the conversion process, here I have by default an option to save optimize converted stories as copies. I also have an option to override the classic stories. The suggested or the default method is to save converted stories as copies, and these converted stories are saved by default in the same folder as the original story. In case if you want to save it in a different folder, you can choose the destination of your choice. To keep it simple, I'm going to save it in the same folder. I click on next, and now the actual conversion process begins. So as I mentioned earlier, the conversion, once a conversion process is done, there is a detailed summary or there is a log of all the converted stories, and it gives you a proper status message. This log can also be exported or the summary can be exported as an Excel file. Here it gives all my classic stories have been converted. It was just a warning, but the conversion overall has been successful. And let's look at another innovation, adjusting bar width at widget level. Now, this particular option is available for designers to adjust the width of the bar so that they can incorporate more data elements to the widget. This option is available for bar and column chart, combination of column and line charts, stacked bar and column charts, including showing as 100%, combination of stacked column and line chart, waterfall chart, and classic bar variances. Now let's look at a demo. So here I have a bar graph. I'm going into the styling property for the bar graph, and here I have an option to set it as set a pixel value for the bar width. So let's say I am setting it as 20 pixel. So my width will be adjusted. If I revert it or if I keep it blank, it will be adjusted back to the default width. So this is a demo of how you can adjust the bar width. Point to be noted is if you have set a chart scaling, the bar width will override the chart scaling capability. So here I have my story opened, and I have it opened on page 1. Now I would like to navigate to page 3. So here I have navigated to page 3. Now I would like to set a bookmark, and I can do this by clicking on bookmark current state. So here you can notice that apart from the standard options that we have, we also have an option to select the default page. By default, it is the active page that is loaded, but users always have an option to set some other page as a default page. You can give a name here. So let me give So once my bookmark is saved, I can reload the story. So here my page has been reloaded. You can see that it has been by default opened on page 1. Now let me open a previously saved bookmark which I just saved, and here I have selected page 3, that is proficiency, as a default page, and here you can see that it directly opens on page 3 instead of page 1. The other thing you can notice, if there are any bookmarks without default pages, so let's say this is a bookmark which didn't have any default page, I can edit it and now I can add a default page to it. By default, here the default page will be loaded as page 1. The option will be loaded from page 1, but users always have an option to choose some other page as a default page. The other caveat to notice, if there is any story which has on init script on page 1, then bookmark with the default page option will not work for them, will not be supported for them.
Hello everyone, my name is Jieden. I am Product Manager for SAP Analytics Cloud. Here I would like to introduce the feature highlights that we have delivered for the QRC4 release in the category of the story extensibility. The first release is that you are now able to assign the CSS class for the widgets inside the composite. So like for example, you see here I have a composite, and within the composite I have a panel and I have a text element, I have a chart. For this panel, I am able to assign the CSS class. So for each widget, you can assign the CSS class except the custom widgets and the multi-action trigger. And this CSS class name can be defined either in Story CSS Editor or the Story Theme artifact. Advantage is that you can already here to using the CSS class name already influence the look and feel of the composites widgets through the Story CSS. You don't need to write any code to do so. You only need to assign the CSS class in the composite definition, and this CSS class is defined in the story theme. That's the first feature. The next feature is also related to the composite. And now you will be able to save a story as a story template if it contains composite without data models, such as a story header or navigation panel. You can see that I have a story using the story header as a composite. And then I can save that as a template, and using this template to create the new story. Within the template, you can see this story header composite are available. So with this template, you can do whatever you want, like you already done before, like adding charts and also adding tables. Now, the advantage is that within the template, the composites are already available, and you can only need to adjust the composites to adjust the story templates. So that's the second important feature. The next one is that we provide one option to override all existing widget styling when applying a theme. So user will have the option to reset all existing widget styling when applying a theme. Today's situation is that we have the theme and we have the styling options. And from the priority point of view is that the styling options is higher than the theme. But if you want to apply theme to already an existing story that the widget styling is already defined, so in that case, you can select this step, reset styling panel settings. That means you reset all the styling panels to the default, and then you can apply the entire theme to your existing story. And then you will be very easily convenient to applying the theme to one existing stories. And here you need to note that widgets in composites, table fonts, thresholds, number formats, and the currency setting will not be overwritten, but other widgets like text widgets and so on, and that can be overwritten. The next is very important for the BEX customers. And here we provide a script API access to the BEX conditions that are defined in SAP Business Warehouse. So we can select or deselecting BEX conditions for charts, and we have the script API to retrieve all BEX conditions for a chart, and the API to get a BEX condition by ID, API to check if the BEX condition is selected, and also obtaining the properties of the BEX condition, that you are able to use a script API to build interactions, buttons, shapes, using shapes and buttons, and to select and to set the BEX condition on the chart like here, and also get BEX conditions. And we also, in the story extensibility area, we have an enhancement to the bookmarks. And this we provide you the options to decide whether you want to include the story filters and also calculations in the bookmark definition. The default behavior is everything is included, the story filter and the calculations. But you can select, for example, the calculation should not be included in the bookmark definition. Means if you change the story calculation, the most actual story calculation information will be reflected to your bookmark, and with that you are much more flexible to define what is included in your bookmark. Another story extensibility feature highlight is that we provide the script API to enable you to set the button to disable or enabled. Why do we need that? Sometimes the user want to see the button is there but is disabled, but only if you have do a certain interactions, then this button is enabled, then you can to do a further action. So it's more for a process workflow. So in our example, like look at here, for example, and at the beginning, this button of update is inactive, grayed out. But if only you select some and input controls, mouse, and after that the button can be turned into active. Then user can click on this button to do further actions, and that you can use a script API to make the button active, inactive, and to help your end users to have a kind of interaction workflow that to avoid that they click this button in the wrong way in the wrong time. So that also help you to make your end user much easier to deal with your storage what you created. So that is the different features. Now I'd like to show that in the live demo. Now let's have a look into in the SAC tenant. So first feature, I would like to show this CSS support for the composite. So you can already see that here I am creating a story based on the two composite. One is the composite header, and this one, composite header. The other is actually this composite card. So I'm using these two composite in my story. You can view in the outline for the page 1, for example, they are all based on the composites. So let's have a look into the runtime, how this story look like based on the composites. So you can see that is my story, right? And I have actually a header, and all this is based on the composite card, but actually assigned with a different key figure. And each composite has same construction. It's a key figure and a key figure value, and you can open actually a pop-up to view the details of this key figure gross margin and into the detailed tables here. What we can see, account gross margin. So, and also you see actually this layout that's with a gray as a background and so on. And we are using the story CSS to influence the composite, right? So if we look at the composite definition, that's a composite card. And here I have a panel. Within the panel, you can see that is a CSS class here. And this is a CSS class is defined in my story CSS. You can see I have a class called card2. I define the background color gray and also the border. And with these features, and the composite creator only need to assign the CSS class in the composite, then the story theme in the story can already influence the look and the feel of the composite. Means that you see actually the background is gray. And previews, you always need to use a function to set the CSS class for the composites. And with this release, you as a composite developer, designer, you just assign CSS class in the widgets within the composite, and this composite will follow the look and the feel what you have defined in the story theme and the story CSS. So that is the first feature, and CSS support for the composite. Now let's have a link to another feature that to support the story template with the composite. So you see I have a story which contains the composite, the header, and now I'm able to use this story, click on save as a template. So here we can also see that give a name, for example, and save it, and then we can save this template. We go to select, we go to the story, go to the template, my template, click on that and open it. Now you will be able to see that header is included, that the composite can be saved in the story template. Now you only actually use placeholders to add charts, add a table to create your story based on this story template. The advantage is that you now can use a composite into the story template in case you want to add another icon and change another color schema. Actually in this composite, you only need to do in the central place in the composite, and then all your story template will be affected as well. Okay, so that is the second feature of the composite, support the composite in the story template. And as a next, I would like to introduce the feature that the back conditions. So let's go back to my original stories here. And let's go to the view time. So here, and we have the script API accesses, and that will help you to use a button or use any shapes and to set the conditions for the chart, SAC chart. For example, here is the BW queries. I can select using the button, for example, to say that should be the top 3 items, and I can reset it, and then we can go to the top 2, and also I'm able to combine the top 2 with the bottom 2. And you can, of course, through this UI interactions to do so, but you can also using the script API to set and get the back conditions. Go to the design time to see how you can write code to support these different buttons. So here, for example, I'm able to, using the script API, chart 3, get data source, get backend conditions. So here, and then set selected true. Then we see that basically is the top 3, and top 3 conditions from here. Go to the second page, and for the bottom 2 is the same. So we will be able to, from the data source, get backend condition and then set that as a selected. So that's how you can use the script API and to access and to set and get the back conditions. And another feature with the Q3 QRC release is the enhancement in the bookmark. So, if you actually go to the outline, here we have a bookmark definition, and we can have a look into that. And the default behavior is that the calculations and the story filters are all included in the bookmark definition. And that means if you change the story filter later on in the design time, or if you change the calculation later on in the story design time, that will not be reflected to your actual bookmark. So now you have the option to decide in the select the components only, code go there, and you will be able to decide whether you want to include these global objects into your bookmark definition. As I mentioned, default behavior is included, but if you want that your story, all the story bookmark always reflect your current design time filter information, all to filter your current design time calculations, and then you can choose deselect that one, and then the bookmark will not notice actually these two information in the bookmark, and that information will always coming from your most actual design time information. So with that, you have more flexibility and option to define what should be all captured in your story bookmark definition. The next feature is also very useful feature about the story theme reset. So that we know we already delivered the theme capabilities, right? So like here in the design time, currently I do not define any theme, but I want to now apply a theme and into my existing story. So for example, I would like to apply the dark theme. You see, some elements here are not able to be actually set to the black background, because in this story, for example, for this chart, we already see and that's styling already defined for this particular chart, right? So usually if I can basically click on that reset button and one by one, and then the theme will be applied. The reason is that the styling, widget styling, has a high priority as a story theme. But if you go through your story, click each chart, each table one by one to click reset, it's really the time-consuming job. So what we introduced in this release is that within, if you open here theme, there is button called Reset Styling Panel Settings. So if you click on that, and we do a global reset for all your widgets in your story to set the styling to the default back, that the theme can be applied to your widgets. If I select on that, and I get also, of course, the information that the setting of the widgets settings in conflict with the theme preference will be reset, okay? But some widgets are exceptions and cannot be affected by this one-time reset. You click on the confirm, then we see only with this one click, and then you have basically reset all the styling panel to the default, and then the existing theme, the story theme, can be applied to this story. Now we can see that really save a lot of your time, and you can much more convenient, easily to apply a theme to your existing story, and to make your story in your company all has corporate identity through this theme capability. Okay, and last but not least, the feature I would like to show you the disabled button, actually that feature. So let's actually first have a look into the runtime and of this story. We can see that. Let me go to the second page. We can see you can click this different conditions right button, but this reset button is actually gray out, means it to give the user the information. It's there, but you cannot click on it. So why not? Because I would like to first actually to user click on condition, whatever which one, top 3, and then you see the reset button is becoming active. So we have the script API behind to set this button active, inactive. So here basically in the top 3 this button, I write a code. So once actually this clicked, and then please set the reset button to active, then we can see, and you can click on the reset button also to reset to the default. So if you look at the codings, it's actually a very simple one on the details page. And in the top 3 here, if I go to edit the script, and we can see first I would like to set the back conditions to top 3 to this chart. After I have set it, and I would like to make the reset button true, means it returns to active and the user can click on that. And with that, and you will be able to help your users to build a kind of guided workflow and to avoid some wrong clicks from users. Okay, that's a highlight of what we delivered in for the Q4 QRC release, and thanks a lot for your listening.
Hi, I would like to introduce a new feature in customer widgets. So customers today are using the customer widget to enrich their stories, but they may face some issues when export the customer widget in some cases. So similar as this customer request, customer would like to have an API for customer widget to provide the old image to be used in the export PDF. And there's already 12 customers are voting for this. So we are providing a new API called Serialized Customer Widget into Image. This interface is optional for the customer developer. If the quality is already satisfied with the built-in export function, the developer doesn't need to implement this interface. But in some complex cases, for instance, the customer widget use quite complex CSS, and this CSS cannot be exported with the built-in export function, they can implement this interface by returning some the image with a string. So here's one simple example. This is one customer widget. So this is an interface. It just returns the string. So normally in some common cases that generate the string is at the backend, the server backend. But right now for the demo purpose, I just return and the string, the hard-coded string. Now I can start to export the PDF. And the customer widget, you can see that can precisely export in the PDF file. So this is a new feature of the customer widget and also the end of my demo. Thank you for watching.
Hello, my name is Pranav and I'm a product manager in SAP Analytics Cloud. Today I'm going to demo a feature within SAP Analytics Cloud scheduling publication, and it is about scheduling a story table in Excel format. So as you know, we already support different format in scheduling publication such as CSV, PDF, PPT, and from starting QRC 4 2024, we will also support an option to schedule a story table data in Excel format and deliver it over an email. In one publication, you can select maximum 5 tables whose data would be exported in Excel tab and deliver it over a email. The Excel file that would be created using scheduling workflow would be very similar to that manual export. So in case if you want to verify before you have created a schedule based on the Excel format, you can do a manual export of a table data into Excel and see the data what you are getting, and the same data would be delivered via scheduling workflow. Currently, as part of a scheduling in Excel format, we will be supporting all data to be extracted from a table into Excel file. What we won't be supporting is point of view of extraction of data to a Excel format. Let's quickly go through a demo and see this feature. Okay, I have this story on top of which I will create a schedule in Excel format and deliver it over email. So this is the story that I have it. Okay, in this story, I have 3 pages, and the page 1 has one table, page 2 has again another table with the name of sales manager, and page 3 has 3 tables: revenue by date, revenue by location, revenue by store. Now I'm going to create a publication on top of this. And in case of a file type, I'll go ahead and select Excel format. Now, the moment I have selected an Excel format, if I go to this, as part of file setting, it will list all the 3 pages over there, and it will list not all the widgets, but the table widget available in each of these pages. So you can see over here now it had one table, here again another on sales manager, and this is the 3 table that we have it. As part of this workflow, I'll select 4 tables over here, which means these 4 table data would be exported into Excel format and deliver it over an email. This is what the data has been filled, and now I'll go ahead and click on create. Okay, so the schedule has been created. When it will run, I'll show you the Excel format which is getting delivered over an email. Okay, so I have got a mail. The schedule has run and it has delivered over on my email ID. So I can see there is a file that is delivered. Finally, when I open this Excel file, I can see there are multiple tabs. There are around 8 tabs which is there. There is one tab for the data for each of the table, and there is another tab which has a detail about that the data extraction that has happened. So by this, there are 4 tables that I was selected. So there is 4 tab for data and 4 tab as a detail of that respective data which is being exported. Thank you for watching. Hello, my name is Pranav and I am a product manager in SAP Analytics Cloud. Today I'll be talking about a feature in SAP Analytics Cloud which is public API to create schedule publication. We have recently released public API, and using this public API you can perform workflows such as create schedule in PDF and PPTX format. You can edit schedule, you can delete schedule using this public API. So what is the use case that we are trying to handle it using this public API? The first and the foremost use case that we want to handle it using this public API is the event-based schedule. So you can listen to any of the events and then use this public API to perform this create workflow with the run now option. So it is as good as when the event is triggered, the schedule would be created and run. So there are different parameter that is available within scheduling publication. Most of the parameter you can configure using this public API. Something like the schedule name, the recurrence type, which story that you want to schedule, what message that you want to provide, what subject that you want to provide. So everything is possible over here. What is not possible right now is creating a schedule in CSV and Excel format and modifying prompt and filter values. So these are things which is not possible. We have also released a blog which has all the details about this, how to use this public API for create, edit, and delete workflow. Thank you for watching.
Thanks for watching. Hopefully our demos have helped you leverage the latest features in SAP Analytics Cloud in your organization. Remember to leave a like on this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all things Analytics Cloud. We have a lot of exciting new features coming your way in 2025, so stay tuned and we'll see you next time.